I'm going to jump straight in and do some of the first modifications or upgrades, replacements, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be putting this little plug here, an XT60. I use them on all my racing drones. They're quite nifty, pretty handy little things. I do prefer them over these T connectors, which I'm just going to cut off here. Get rid of that. Okie dokie. I'm just going to pull off the heat shrink that they had on there. I have a set of wire strippers, which not everyone needs. You can do this with a little knife or a set of side cutters if you have them, but if you're an enthusiast, I do recommend getting the right tools. Definitely makes the job easier. So I'm just going to strip those back. Now I'm going to do some soldering here. I remember when I first got into drones, I was very hesitant and a bit dubious about soldering, but after doing it a bit, it definitely gets easier and it's nothing to be afraid of. And it is something that you should get good at. You just have to do it a lot to get good at it. Obviously, your first solders are never going to be as good as the solders you get later. Always use flux. Flux is your friend for sure. So I'm just going to flux those up. And now I'm going to tin these. I'm using a battery operated TS100 soldering iron, which definitely made soldering a lot easier. I feel it's definitely a good soldering iron, can definitely be the difference between how hard or easy you find your soldering. So you want to give it a bit of flux, dip your thing in the flux, a little bit of smoke, it's alright. Well ventilated area for this flux, it is toxic. And you can get one of these cleaners, which is just steel wool pretty much. You can use a sponge that's used demineralized water. I'm just going to solder this up. Now you want to try and touch the wires with your soldering iron, make the wires hot, and then hit the wires with the solder. A lot of people perhaps don't know about that, but that's definitely a good little trick. A little bit of solder on your tip, heat up the wire that you're soldering, and then when it's hot enough you can just press the solder on and it'll go right in. That's called tinning. Just going to tin that a little bit more. Right, now we're going to get that. Always get your heat shrink. If you've got heat shrink, I definitely recommend using it. Always remember to put it on before you do the soldering. I've definitely made that mistake many a time. Now on the side of these XT60s, there's often a little plus and a negative, just to make sure you get the orientation right. Obviously the plus goes into the red, and the black goes into the negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of solder into this. Flux, always flux. A little bit of flux on the peg. Now, the quicker you can do this, the better, because you'll find that sometimes the solder, if you're soldering into this plug, if you do it for too long, you can actually melt the actual plug. I've got my shaky hand on today. Awesome. So I'm just gonna get a set of tweezers and make this a little bit easier for myself. There's a good little trick that I've learned over the times. With a set of tweezers. What you can do is get your tweezers. Put your XT60 that you're trying to solder, or any plug really, like so, like that. And a bit of solder. Just going to put a little bit of solder in there so that there's something to stick to when I solder this plug in. I'm going to move my little solder holder over here. I'm just going to heat it all up, and it should stick together pretty nicely. so. And you can get a little bit more solder. Put it down in there. Now this is a little bit tricky at first. You do have to, have a few goes and you'll get it, but I get it to stick. Be careful, the wire does get hot. My fingers were just a little bit too hot there. They do recommend using some sort of holding apparatus, which you can get. But once you broach your initial fear of soldering, it's not too difficult to just be quick enough that you don't burn your fingers. So I'm just going to do the other side now. Set that like that in there. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm going to get solder, tip up my soldering iron, bit of flux, bit of a clean, a little bit of solder on the tip of the iron, and then down into the plug. Now at first you just need a little bit to get it going, something like that. And then we can get our wire all nice. Oops, there we go. Now heat this up with the wire. Now the idea is you're trying to heat up the plug and the wire. You'll be able to see that the solder gets quite liquid quite quickly, and you hold it there for a few seconds. You want the solder to set and then release. Now we have a new freshly soldered plug in. Clean my soldering iron, turn that off. And there we go. We have a nicely soldered plug. Doesn't have to be too extreme. Actually, with my drones I usually make it a lot more thicker just because they do hit things a lot harder. I don't expect to be hitting anything at 80 kilometers an hour with this machine. Okay, so now I've got my heat shrink, obviously on there before. You can just use a lighter. I actually have lashed out and bought myself a little gas operated torch that's refillable. Just to wait for a couple of seconds for that to heat up. You can tell usually when it heats up. Obviously don't point it at your face too close, but if you look down inside it'll change nice red colour. There we go. Now I'm just going to go over the heat shrink like this. Heat shrink is definitely one of my favourite substances in this hobby, I must say. It's very satisfying. So there we go. We've got a nice freshly soldered plug on. Just remember to turn that off so I don't burn myself. And there we go. Now I have a new XT60 plug which will fit my batteries, and we're good to go. You make sure that you get that plus and negative sign right, so you get red to red, black to black. If you don't, you'll have problems. You can fry electronics, and trust me, I have. You'll notice, actually, I've just noticed that this is red to black and black to red. I'm not actually sure why that is, but I just checked before to make sure it all worked properly, and it all works properly, so that's probably something in either the ESC or the motor. Now the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do right now so that I can get my batteries to fit is I'm going to pull out this battery tray, remove the Velcro, like that, and then with your screwdriver, or if you can get an electric screwdriver, they definitely make a big difference, I would say. Like, I've definitely undone a lot of things by hand. With my drones I used a hex head screwdriver for many years. It's only last Christmas I bought myself this for a Christmas present, and I have to say it's definitely made my unscrewing a lot more enjoyable. Now I'm just using it as a screwdriver at the moment to get the stiffness out. Make sure I wind it off. Now I can use the motor function. There we go, look at that. So I'm just going to pull these screws out one by one. That one needs a little bit more. There we go. I'll just turn that back a little bit. going. And when I'm doing replacements or modifications to my machines, I often like to have the things that I'm doing sitting on the bench ready to go. So I'm pull that out. I've got the longer one that I'm going to put in, which fits my batteries. Now, this bit often confuses me. You should always make sure you get your battery straps in right. Pretty sure that's how they go. Yep, that's good. I might actually put that in first. Okie dokie. So we're just going to screw this back in. Line him up with the holes. Get your screwdriver. In there, like so. Oh, and of course my electric screwdriver is starting to run a bit flat, but that's okay. Definitely got a few screws left with it, so should be fine. In like that. Oh yes, he's straddling. So I will get these screws in tight enough and then finish it off with a hand screw for sure. Rightio, just tighten those in a little bit more. They don't have to be super tight, these ones, I imagine. There's just the battery tray, so it's not going to fly around. Again, we're not doing massively high speeds with these things. But you do want to make sure it's nice and firm, so it just doesn't move around. More. There we go. Now some electric screwdrivers you can't do this hand tightening with. Just make sure yours is capable of it. Alright, now we're going to slot these Velcro straps back in. A little bit fiddly, but not too bad. Pulling them over there like that. Oops. Back through. Over. That's one strap. I'm going to do the last strap. Oh yes, this one's going to be fiddly because of the servo. Oh no, it's not too bad. Not too bad. Okie dokie. Now I should be able to fit my battery in there nicely. Just undo that again. Excellent. So that one's there. Get that centered roughly. And away we go. That's pretty good. I might just tighten this one up a little bit more. If you make sure you get the little buckles down as close to the tray as possible, and you'll get more adjustment with your strap. There we go. Modification stage 1. Just tuck that down in there. Now before you plug your battery in, you should always make sure your transmitter is on first. Put the transmitter on first, then the receiver. And there we go. We have battery tray and new plug modification done.